This is Samrat Kishor, one more time bringing to you the Baseline Show in India. We do this every Saturday, and this is the official office hours for Baseline Protocol community based in India. We do this at a convenient time in India so that people can join in, contribute ideas, ask questions, and learn more from the experts on Baseline. Um, Today, we have a very special guest with us. Besides the Baseline community members, so we have Mr. Sanjeev Garg with us. He's a long-time veteran of the supply chain industry, been into various senior roles in consulting as well as industry. Um, and I would like Sanjeev talk a little bit more about his experience in the past and the kind of supply chains that he's seen. Sanjeev, you would have actually seen the transition of supply chains from paper trail to now digital and semi-digital supply chains. Yeah. And then we have Mohan. Thank you, Mohan, for joining us again this morning. Hi, Mark. Thanks again for joining. And hey, Sonal. Thanks for making it. And I do see. So Sonal, thank you so much for making this is the first time you joined my show, and I hope to see you more often uh, on the India show. Baseliners who are watching us, maybe today, maybe in future, Sonal is the awesome community manager from Consensus. She is the one behind most of the push that you see on community initiatives. Um, Join us on Slack. Go to baseline-protocol.org and you'll find us. You'll find our Get Involved section. So get involved. Join our Slack. You'll also find the YouTube link and all documentation pertaining to the baseline protocol. You'll also find Sonal and all of us there on the Slack. So do join the community, contribute in any way you can. If you're a developer, then this is the best time for you to join in the community. We have most of we have testnet available for base ledger. We have most of the protocols done where you can start experimenting. There are also reference implementations available if you go to our GitHub. So that's it from me. Without further ado, I'd like to bring in Sanjeev. And Sanjeev, let's talk about supply chain. So what we do, the format of the show is what we do is we are trying to educate the community around what's happening in a particular industry. And not particularly supply chain is not an industry; it's cutting across horizontally. That's my opinion. It cuts across multiple industries, but uh, we start with TLDR, which start with basics, and then we sort of deep dive into concepts about about any subject matter that we pick up. So we've done telecom, we've done sustainability, we've done insurance, healthcare in the past, and yeah, today we have you and thank you, Sanjeev, once again. You're the most experienced individual that I've brought on this show. So thanks again for making time for this. So over to you, Sanjeev. Please let us, let the viewers know about your background, a little bit of introduction, and then we'll dive deep into supply chains.
Hi, thank you very much, Samrat, and everybody else on the panel. Uh, it's been really exciting to be a part of you on this program, and I really appreciate the gesture shown here. Yes, I have been experienced supply chain professional, and the journey has been quite long, eventful, and at the same time exciting. And it has evolved as I've grown as a professional. It has evolved through many ages. Like you correctly said, yes, it started from a paper work and now it's all digital. See, I have close to over 3 decades of supply chain experience, starting from manufacturing, that too of industrial equipments, then into textiles, and then getting into telecom. Telecom is the era when, I mean, in India, it came in 1985. And since then, I have been associated with telecom, and that's how the word digital came into being. And it came into our mind what is digital. And prior to that, you see, the concept of digital was not so known, and you were not working on this. So that's been a journey all across. And as we uh, proceed further, then I can deep dive into my experiences of how it has evolved in terms of the working, in terms of the technology, and in terms of the adaptation of the technology.
Cool, superb. So that's about telecom. And what were your stints about in the big fours? You know, you also have been with the big fours and in various nations.
You see, it was basically again the process re-engineering. While the technology was evolving and the process has to be revisited, they had to be re-engineered to meet the requirements of the markets, meet the requirements of the competition, and to be abreast of all others, and to be in touch with the evolving technologies. So while I had taken many transformational, digital transformational projects, and while these four consulting agencies like EY, PwC, Deloitte, and KPMG, they have been our business partner while we evaluated and we were a business partner in adopting those technologies and implementing those technologies all across the organization. And same goes true for the IT companies like IBM was there, like Infosys is there, Wipro is there, TCS is there. So we evolved new technologies, new products, which were again abreast of the times in the telecom industry and in supply chain in general as well. So that's the exposure which these type of consulting and IT conglomerates have given to the industry.
Awesome, awesome. And Sanjeev, tell us a little more about. So, if we were to deep dive, if we were to sort of understand what a supply chain is typically, you know, if you were to explain to a newbie or somebody coming from, let's say, a software development background who does not understand a lot about supply chain or the heavy lifting which goes in, so how would you give them an introduction to supply chains?
You see, at any organization, whether it is manufacturing or services, supply chain is an integral part of their business operations. That means end to end, starting from internal to external. While we talk about the manufacturing aspect of any supply chain, it starts from the requirements. Yeah, like we are launching a new product, or we are going to produce a product which needs to be launched as per the market demand or the demand forecast which the sales organization has summed up. We start with the requirements. Yeah, the requirement is I need these kind of products, I need this kind of a technology, I need these kind of services. Now the supply chain department, or what we call is the sourcing department in another way, is they look out for the vendors, they look out for the agencies, they look out for the business partners who can deliver those products, those services at an agreed contractual terms and conditions. Now, if that is the internal part of it, once you have summed up your requirements and you have gone to the market to get a quote for those requirements and get the goods and supplies against them. So that's one part of the supply chain. And all those materials which has come into you, and either you are going to uh, manufacture into a new product or to create a new services, then you go to market it to the end customer through a distribution channel, through directly. So when we say supply chain end to end, it starts from internally and goes up to the customer part of it.
So it may be raw material coming in, getting processed in the company, and then delivered goods being delivered to consumers via the distribution channel, which is set. So yeah, all of that goes. In fact, a few days back, I was watching a video from Elon Musk, and he said that our supply chain is disrupted by a $3 wire, which went behind the dashboards of the Tesla cars. And he said because of those tests, because of that $3 wire, he was not able to deliver Tesla cars. So the supply chain is it's like the pulse of any, especially manufacturing companies. So, and so can you pick up any industry and talk a little more about, what would it mean? What would be the nuts and bolts of a supply chain? Pick up any industry of your choice.
Well, I can take an electrical equipment company like, let's say we are there's an organization which is making um, power distribution transformers or say compact substations,
Hmm.
right? So let's take an example of a manufacturing. So when you're going for this, then you got to have the specifications of the products which you are going to market, the specifications for which the customers require them for. Now, basis that you firm up the requirements in terms of what all raw materials would I need to assemble or to manufacture a electrical transformer or a power transformer for distribution or for transmission. Yeah. So once those requirements are there, yeah, then obviously then there are processes for supply chain, and once the requirement from the indenting departments comes in,
Yep.
then when you float the tenders for that, you float the quotations for that, or you ask for expression of interest from the buyers from for that product. And once the tenders are floated or the quotations are floated, then there's a process of uh, accumulating, interpreting, or analyzing those offers, whether they qualify technically or not to the requirements or not. And then goes in fine if then you select the buyers basic, basically on certain technical parameters and on commercial parameters and on their experiences as well as on their competences, financial competences, technical competences, and all these things once are evaluated, then you go in for shortlisting of those vendors which meets your criteria as well as your requirements, and then
Yep.
starts the commercial process of evaluation in terms of the pricing, in terms of the commercial terms and conditions, in terms of the delivery requirements, and in terms of the after sales supports. So
Hmm.
once it has
Hmm.
been evaluated on technical and commercial aspects, then you are at a certain um, level to make a decision, okay, with which vendor to go in for, and at what price and what terms and conditions you need to go in for. So basically,
Yeah.
once that is formed up, then you enter into an agreement with the buyer, whether it is a master agreement or it is one-time agreement or it's simply a purchase order which is given to a supplier for that purpose. And once that is completed, then the process of goods receiving, goods acknowledging, then quality checks, and basically whether the goods are as per the requirements or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, if the quantities are as per the requirements or not. So all those kind of matches with your requirements are done, and then the supplier he puts in his invoice, and that invoice has to be then again mapped with your requirements, what you have received, what you had ordered. Yeah,
Yeah.
so there is a link. There's a link at every step of the process which needs to be uh, evaluated and as well as uh, accepted. So now this may also bring in certain kind of gaps in terms of the understanding of the requirements,
Yeah.
like what I was ordered, what I had sent a requisition for, whether that has been well understood by the supply chain department. The RFQ which the supply chain department has floated to the market, to the business
Hmm.
partners, whether they have also understood it in the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So similarly, while I am placing a purchase order, so has the supplier understood the purchase order the way I have communicated to him, or are there gaps in between? And once he's supplying the material again, that's another stage where the mismatch could again happen. And finally, at the time of payment release, whether the payment which is the invoice which is putting in, does that matches my purchase order? Does that matches my good receipts? So it's in totality, if you look at it, there are many links in a chain,
Yeah. Yeah.
and every link, an output from an every link is input to the next link.
Yeah. So I think that's a great point that you brought up, which is around multiple parties passing on the transaction. That those that that data which is sort of traveling across the supply chain with the goods, and then there are acceptances. One side is sending, so there are handoffs. and those handoffs are the points where there may be misinterpretation of data, or on the other side, if I were to think about an extreme, there may also be leakages of data, right? Where there's some sensitive supply chain data which may go out. A lot of companies may, it's their IP which may go out. So if you were to zoom in a little on the supply side, so for example, you took up electrical equipments or electrical goods. So if you were to zoom in a little on the supply chain where, let's say, deliveries are happening, so how many players do you see, absolutely disconnected, non-trusting parties do you see which are involved in the supply chain for the example industry that we picked up?
Yeah, so transformer industry is basically a kind of a medium and a large organization. So when the scale is large, then the interested parties, interested suppliers, some of them are educated enough, they are technology driven, they are data driven, so they understand the requirements and they respond to them. And majority of the industry is in say medium scale, where the suppliers they are not that technologically adapting, so they may not be having that kind of an experience in terms of the uh, uh, way the transactions are being done digitally, or maybe in a manner that they can understand the requirements the way it has been given to them by the purchaser. So
Hmm.
it depends upon the industry per se.
Yeah, yeah. So if let's say, I mean, I had done some work on supply chains when I was in my consulting roles with my previous employers. So one of the larger issue which I saw was one on on the transportation side, that there were these shippers and transporters and warehouses which would also always sort of have a disconnect around the times of arrival of consignments and the quantities and the qualities, etc. Somebody would say that things got spoiled in transportation, while they would have got spoiled in warehouse, etc. So there was tons of these things, and then there is also the India factors which come in. So let's land the concept to India. If there are warehouses which may not have proper physical security, then they may be pilferages, etc. So all of that considered, I think these are at least 8 to 10 non-trusting parties which get involved in end to end in supply chain, sourcing raw materials to deliveries to respective factories to finished goods reaching the consumers. So can we talk a little more about the data which gets created? So can we, the kind of documents that we just addressed. So can we talk about data which flows along with the goods? And are there any frictions that you see in your experience over so many years, that there are, points of data which these parties don't agree on? Where is that affinity?
Yeah, you rightly touched the point. I think the recent COVID pandemic effect has highlighted this aspect to a great extent,
Yeah,
because the disruption which has caused in the supply chain was mainly because of the visibility of the data and the visibility of the transactions happening.
yeah,
Because even developed organization or large organization, even they couldn't cope up with this kind of a situation, because everything was happening in silos, if you look at it, within the organization and outside the organization as well. You see, why we say silos is basically every organization has certain functions, and every function has to perform based upon his objective, right?
yeah,
Whereas the objective of the organization or of the business is something which is overlooking the objectives of all the functions. Now, when we talk about data, you see, data is again a strategy. It's a business strategy, right? If the organization has understood that the data is important to him, yeah, then his strategy, business strategy, revolves around the data
yeah,
in a that manner. It is considered as an asset. I think of late, many of the organizations recently have understood that data is also an asset,
Yeah.
though it does not reflect on the financial balance sheets and uh, other documents. But that is the biggest asset today. The organizations, whether they are manufacturing, whether they are services, is the data. Data is the value to them, and um, many of the companies they have gone into deep reds because that visibility on data, the visibility on the agility on the data was not there. So why this has happened is the companies within the organization, the functions, they work in silos. The data is lying in certain applications which that particular function is operating upon. Yeah. So it is closer to him. The data is not accessible to another functions within the same organization. Let's not
Mm.
talk about outside the organization. Let's first talk about within the organization itself. So when we talk about, say, let's take an example of finance. Finance is taking care of the financing part, the budgetary part, or the fund bookkeeping part of the organization, right? Then when it comes to supply chain, we look at the end users. Who are my end users? May the IT department, may the technical department, may the marketing department, may the customer care department, or anybody else. Now, these department, they are working as per their guidelines, as per their requirements. They create their data as per their requirements. And their data is only accessible to them, not to anybody else. So they work upon their data and pass on the end product based upon their understanding to the next function, who is to further work on this and process that data by giving his output on that data.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What's happening in the nutshell is everybody is having their data. Nobody knows what the other function is going to work upon that data. And with the result, if you look at the management, if you look at the business leaders at the top, they don't have visibility. If the strategy is not a data, then they don't have the visibility on their data to the root level. And hence the decision
Yeah.
making and actions, which could have taken up, uh, which could have been very effective. So
So the
there's a
management may
gap.
be flying blind, in some decisions that
Exactly.
they're taking.
Management would be taking decisions based upon
Yeah.
the facts which have come in front of them, the data which have come in front of them,
Yeah.
and there is no way to validate their data. The
Ah,
person
yeah.
owning the data is the only validation. He says, yes, I've prepared this data, but what is how it is validated, how accurate it is, no one knows except that gentleman who is presenting to the board or to the
I see.
management.
I see. So there are two problems then: the data reaching the right people at the right time, and then of course the genuineness or the correctness of that data. That's
Now,
also important.
let's talk about once this information is out in the market with
Yeah.
the other stakeholders like sellers, like business partners, like agencies. Now, the same thing happens with them as well. The data which I've shared with them, they don't have a visibility into my operations. It is
Mm.
only a piece of information which has gone to them. While you are referring to the silos, or while you are referring to the disconnects between the different components of delivering the products and services, when we take an example of, say, a vendor has made the shipments. Now, the shipment he hands over those shipments to a carrier agency. Yeah, whether by sea or by air, right? There comes another agency who handles that data now, whether it is documents or the data which he carries.
Mm.
Now, that data is shared with the handling agency, right? From his hands, the data has been given to him. Now, these three different agencies are working of their own. They are working on their softwares, their applications within that
Yeah.
organization, and that has nothing to do either with the buyer or with the seller or with the agencies which are involved in between.
I see.
And
So they may
hence,
be serving their own purposes, but or meeting their own
yes,
mandates within the organization, but for the entire supply chain, they're not adding much value, and
correct.
they may still be taking printouts of that information and passing it on. uh, in paper copies, and of course that's the most inefficient way of carrying forward data uh,
Exactly.
within a supply chain. So we
So
have
that's what
yeah,
creates then disconnects, and that's what creates distrust amongst the um, agents in the supply chain.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. See, on that note, I'd like to invite Mohan. Mohan has a solid background on uh, master data management, if I may put that correctly, Mohan. And of course he's been with Tipco in the past, and they've sort of taught the world how to manage data, especially which flows within companies. So Mohan, do you want to highlight some points here, and what are your thoughts on the points that Sanjeev sir just brought in?
Yeah, I mean, um, what it's always, as Sanjeev mentioned, I think it's information silos. Not everybody's
Yeah,
sure what information the other has. So we always look at raw materials, you know, the products. So sales department wants certain types of products. They want certain availability of products. Logistics has requirements of, what they can, how much that can be shipped, given what transportation you have, etc. So everybody's expectations, include from starting from the sales, but there's no, as Sanjeev pointed out, there's no model that says sales says I need this data. Um, this data is an asset to me. I need to know, how what will happen, what are the impact, what types of things will impact my availability of these products in this volume at this time, right? So what's going to impact it? What are all the dependencies, and what's the risk associated with it? So data is an asset, which Sanjeev mentioned, and the risks to that data. What are the risks? And then transporting that in that asset requirements, if you want to call it that, because we're always talking
yeah,
product requirements, but the data asset requirements back to the supply chain, and so that you sort of each one says, oh, I need to provide this. Okay, so if I'm going to be running into, I've got labor problems starting up, or there's some law that's passing, and
yeah,
there's something's going to impact that. This is how I should model this as a risk to this, so that that can kind of trickle down the supply, trickle forward in the supply chain, and say, oh, there is a risk, like your $3 Elon Musk wire. Why that wire was not available is anybody's guess, right?
oh, the shipment
That
was stuck in China, yeah.
it was stuck in China. So, oh, there's going to be shipping problems, right? That's a probability. But if
Yeah,
the probability is associated with the data, or I guess the product, then the thing is, then you can say, well, they say I'm going to get 10 product, 1,000 units of this, but likely, given the probability that this might happen, I might only get 10, right? So I think that's missing. I mean, Sanjeev, this is actually a question for you. Uh, how would you think of data as supply chain? Thinking of supply chain of data.
You see, the point here is, like we said earlier, like we discussed earlier, is everybody is working on his applications, on his set of uh, operations where his data is lying, and that data is not visible to the others. When we talked about this consignment getting stuck in China, neither the freight forwarder nor the customer handling agency (CHA) was aware where exactly is the consignment lying and what are the reasons
mm,
for that.
yeah,
So he is captured. Okay, this consignment has been sent by this docket number. It left on this at this time. It will ETA is going to be this much, and it will land there. That's it. That's the data part which he has, but he does not know the data operations part of his counterpart who has shipped the material. Similarly, the end buyer, he doesn't have total visibility about what the system of CHA is going to capture and what is going to relate to the buyer, right? So that is the challenge. And the way we look at it, the way the technology is evolving, the way the digital transformation is happening, I think we need to find out a solution where this transparency or traceability of the
yeah.
data from end-to-end supply chain is visible amongst all. That will
Just
that
one. So go ahead.
Yeah. So that will only help us in getting, I mean, avoiding these kind of situations recurring in future.
Finance, come to think of it, finance is actually not finance, the corporate finance, but in Wall Street or investment banking finance is an example because every aspect of an asset that's traded has someone monitoring it, and any impact on any volatility that can occur because of some macroeconomic or microeconomic or any particular corporate risk that might be, everything is modeled. It's actually transparent, right? So if a company is involved, then if there's something going on in the company, there's a risk and there's a price associated with that. If there's
Yeah.
macroeconomic change that's happening, if there's Federal Reserve Bank issues that are coming up, currency, fiscal policy, so government policy, uh, banking policy, corporate effects, everything is modeled in a very transparent way. So you're always able to capture it very quickly, right? In the volatility, in the pricing, et cetera, et cetera. I don't see that transparency from what you're talking. That's perhaps a good thing to look at as how can we get to that
Yeah.
beautiful, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Awesome conversations transpiring today on the Baseline Show India. Um, there's one pertinent question which I came across when I was working on a baseline problem, and we are doing a POC. We were doing a POC with a retailer, and they said that let's try and find a benchmark. How will we even trace the value of the new blockchain-based system that you're introducing? And 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 then we found that, what, let's pick up as an example a recall. So let's say one piece of one batch of mangoes was found rotten, and then we want to find out where exactly it originated from. And then we tried and find out how many, what time will it take for us to trace back a pack of mangoes, where it came from. So any guesses on any of the panelists, how much time they actually came up with? Any guesses? One box of mangoes, they just wanted to trace it back to the supply chain and find out where they came from actually, which farm.
Maybe taken more than a week's time. If it
Yeah.
was not, say, there was no barcoding on the cases, and the barcoding was not being
No, no, it
traced.
was all there. It was all there, sir. I'm talking about one of the biggest retailers of the US.
Okay.
So they had very mature processes, sorted supply chain, um, all documentation in place. But any guesses? And I'm seeing some big eye openers. Okay, cool. That's a comment worth reading. So yeah, any guesses? Okay, time is up for guesses now. So what we came was that what we arrived at was 6 days. So it actually took 6 days
It's a
to
week.
trace back, and I'm talking about a big retailer in the US, and they said it's going to take us 6 days to actually pin down where exactly these mangoes are originated from. And then we did a POC with a blockchain based system for traceability, and we brought it down to 2.2 seconds.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so that's the value potentially that a lot of blockchain projects were projecting to deliver. A couple of years back, until a couple of years back. And I would like to invite my friend Mark to talk a little more about how this was made possible, the enhancement in the speed, and of course what happened to these kind of projects and how Baseline can help here. Mark, up
Okay.
for it?
Well, yeah. I mean, and you're actually fortunate that I actually know a little bit about this particular project. Um, no, really, that was one thing. And to going back to what the others were saying is, along with the movement of goods and services, there's also a data fabric that is accompanying the movement as it moves through the supply chain. And to your point, especially within food supply chains, if you're going to have a particular product that is, at risk of becoming contaminated, either
Yeah.
with E. coli or listeria, and people are getting sick. And so there is a mad dash to find out where did that particular batch of foodstuffs come from,
Yeah.
and how do we remove it from the supply chain? Then how do we, basically go and do all of the recovery to find out, why it happened. Did something sit in a warehouse too long? Was something too close to a high moisture surface? Something like that. And to Sanjeev's point, I mean, it would take, even currently under ideal conditions, would take a week to 10 days to piece together that data fabric. And there was a blockchain based project that had come out that put it down to a matter of seconds, that you were talking about. And that really kind of introduces another solution to the persistent supply chain problem, is that when it comes to product recall. What is it that, even if there, it doesn't have to be foodstuffs, but I mean, it can be something that had a defective part, whether it's an airbag,
Yeah.
something like that. So you want to pinpoint, where did the defect happen? And it may have been something that may have been designed on its own, but wasn't designed to fit, as a component part to uh, um, other pieces that make up an entire product.
Yeah.
There's data that is, associated with each particular product and its movement.
Mm.
And it's a siloed landscape to where the data sharing and handoff really is only as good as the people that are actually performing the data sharing and handoff. And so to automate that was one of the main goals of the project that you were talking about. And it's really interesting because they came up with a lot of other unintended things that they found out about it that were a little bit eyebrow raising, or at least somewhat embarrassing,
Yeah.
because when they were fleshing out the requirements for the project, they did find out that there was about 500,000 tons of food that was labeled as organic, then could possibly be grown by the
Yeah.
landmass
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
from where
I
they
think we're
came
talking about
from.
the same project then.
Yes, we are. And that was something
Okay.
that they're like, wait a minute, this is going to be some embarrassing details about it and stuff. And so, but again, that's part of innovation. You find out things that you never thought that you were going to.
True
Um,
that.
but that movement and handoff is really, solving for that, as we found out with this project, by putting together that unified data structure within a blockchain, so
Mm.
that every different data field could be shared amongst all of the participants upstream and downstream. Was really compelling. But you get into the human factors to where they're basically saying, well, first of all, I don't know how to integrate a blockchain into my uh,
Mm.
architecture. And it's not something as simple as I can just connect my architecture through an API to a external blockchain structure that everybody else has to connect into, and assuming that everybody is as diligent at maintaining your IT infrastructure as you are. So
Yeah.
it was a great idea, but putting it into practice was a little bit tricky. And that's where I think Baseline has a tremendous advantage, because you are using the existing platforms, you're using everybody's existing silos. What you're doing is you are basically connecting them loosely through zero knowledge to say that my record keeping matches yours.
Yeah.
And within a lot of the friction and lag time within this data sharing and reconciliation is, it's 40% of the operational cost is
Mm.
the time lag between saying, does my invoice match your bill? And, because oftentimes, and can you prove that? And am I comfortable enough to, accept that?
Mm.
So, and plus at the same time, you don't have to worry about, a huge capital investment, spinning up an entire new, environment to where everybody can at least share the data. This is a way of
Yeah.
saying that all the data stays within their systems of record, but is in a constant state of synchronization. So
Yeah.
that
Constant
forward,
state, constant state of
yeah,
synchronization. Yeah. So
yeah,
I think that happens to be our motto on the Baseline Show India. Constant
awesome.
state of synchronization. No, thank you so much, Mark. I think very interesting perspectives, and I'm glad we arrived at the same project without even taking any names. We can, yeah. Mohan, you want to go ahead,
Go
ask
ahead, Mohan.
questions.
Yeah, with respect to this supply chain issue, with respect to, the sort of infected product, if you want to call it that. Um, so, for example, if you're doing forensics, and you're saying that this product was was stored in these particular facilities, handled by these people, etc. And so you're looking for where you could have gotten infection. You said moisture, for example. Maybe was it too much moisture? So um, you might not that information about what temperature settings there are, what humidity levels there are, for example, in a storage facility, or the in a shipping environment, what their handling cleanliness is, or standards are, may not necessarily all be shared. So you're missing information. So how would you go about, in this particular case of the problem that you were solving? Um, how would you say, well, we need to know um, the environmental parameters which is not being shared, you need to share that as well
Yeah.
into the blockchain? How would you ask for extra information if it's required in the forensics process?
I would say the first thing to do would be to ask them for the information, and when they cannot provide it, that pretty much opens up a need that needs to be solved. Um, Generally, when you have supply chains that need to have that type of data capture when it comes to environmental conditions, as far as temperature,
Hmm.
humidity, pressure, that's really when you start to get into pharmaceutical supply chains, particularly
Yeah.
with orphan drugs,
Yeah.
these bespoke medications that are assembled through engineered proteins and different monoclonal antibodies and a bunch of other big Scrabble words um, that they have to account for all of that, because these medications, if they spend a lot of time outside of these environmental parameters, will become ineffective. And these medications generally are extremely expensive, just in the time and the materials put together, and they're made bespoke generally for a particular patient. Most commonly, it's cancer patients that you will
Precision
have these
medicines. Yeah.
types of advanced, bespoke type of medications that have to be handled, within a certain thermal corridor or within pressure and all of that. And the best way of actually doing that is you have to attach a type of IoT or RFID sensor with the payload that it can then monitor movement, positioning, and timing, but also the environmental conditions that you were talking about. Um, it's as you start to put it together, you're going to assume a certain amount of further refinement. You're
Yeah.
going to have certain like within foodstuff warehouses and stuff, they say we really don't track our humidity and pressure and all of that. And you just have to let them know as well, we need you to do that. And actually you can find instruments at a fairly commonly, that can capture
Yeah.
that type of data, that can then broadcast it at least to all of the devices that are with the payload. Still gives them a much better view into the entire supply chain as a whole, which to as we were talking about before, it takes it down from a week to a few seconds. So
Awesome. No, I think that's also a use case for blockchain enabled system where so I had seen that similar situation in the past, Mohan, where one of the providers actually brought up that a lot of times this data is required, and a lot of times their contracts are based on maintaining those service levels in terms of temperature, humidity, etc. So they use blockchain to also protect that data. There's non-repudiation, there's integrity of that data, which is also important. So yeah, I think that worked out beautifully, that particular aspect, and that was a logistics company doing this experimentation. And as I said, a lot of these experiments have sat for a couple of years because in the lack of the right value versus cost conundrum that a lot of these initiatives have been sitting idle. I think baseline does provide one way of you know taking these projects out of the shelves and starting to implement them really. And yeah, with that, I would want to bring back Sanjeev with for some questions from the other panelists and also from myself. So one question which I have, what one pertinent question I have, Sanjeev, is if you were to influence supply chain leaders like yourself or in your previous roles, what would be the key considerations for them to adopt something like baseline protocol or blockchain in general?
You see, the recent happenings of pandemic has been a great learning, and any CPO or CFO or CEO would understand the requirements of data, the requirements of data visibility, and the actions which can be taken based upon the data. So basically, it is going to be a cultural driven thing at the management level.
Hmm.
So which will I mean prevail down the line in the organization. Yeah. So what I would like to say here is looking into the current scenario, the way the situation is, we are no
Yeah.
more dependent upon working in silos. We are no more dependent upon working within the organization. So while we are talking about visibility, traceability, as well as authenticity and
Yeah.
security, yeah, these are the four elements which is going to govern the way forward in terms
Yeah.
of any organization, uh, starting from their very existence to be competing in the market or earning good money in the market.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And a lot of organizations have gone into digital transformation journeys. Some of them planned or prioritized their journeys before others, and some of them were like just knee-jerk reactions. I call them COVID digital initiatives, which have been induced by COVID and either the flow of business or the lack thereof. But there is a lot of stuff happening in digital transformation. So we in general, baseline in general appeals to the CIO and the CISO both at the same time. We use highest level of data encryption and a very fancy cybersecurity concept called zero knowledge proofs for for storing the proofs. And there is absolutely no data which flows onto the blockchain. So there is uh, highest degree of data security because data is not going anywhere. It just stays in the systems of record where they originally belong, um, until the two parties want to actually send out the information via other channels, not via baseline, for sure. And as the co-founder of baseline seldom says on our shows, no data goes on the blockchain. so that's
Yeah.
so that's where we are. Yeah. uh, and in terms of adoption, which industries do you see should be looking at baseline first? So uh, are they the cash rich industries, or are they the industries which have minimal margins and they want to run on hyper optimized operations? Which are the industries you see which are ripe for baseline adoption?
You see, being a supply chain professional, I would say any such initiative has to have a business case, whether
Yeah.
whether it's a small industry or it's a medium industry or it's a big industry. So if it has a business case, yes, it will definitely sail through in any of the organization. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So in case it's a big organizations like large organization,
Yeah.
multinationals,
Yeah.
right? Like oil and gas is there, or metals or minerals are there, yeah, or they're into FMCG or retail are there,
Yeah.
right? It depends upon, I mean, what state of technology are they into at this point of time
Yeah.
and where they want to lead it to. So that's where the business strategy comes into being. While we are just talking about the business digital transformation, so
Yeah.
many of the organization they consider certain IT projects as digital transformations, which
Yeah.
in fact
Yeah.
is not a digital transformation at all. It is just fixing few things, some processes by
Yeah.
the help of IT, and calling it to be a digital transformation.
Oh, I know one company which is calling themselves digital transformation. You know what? We're embarking on a journey of digital transformation, and all they were doing was moving their email to the cloud. So yeah, they've been stuff like that. So very interesting perspective, Sanjeev sir. Any parting thoughts? And with I would want to invite Sonal also to talk a little. Sonal has had a lot of fun at Eat Atlanta. Mark, yourself as well. So why don't you both of you talk a little more about what happened at Eat Atlanta, what transpired, and what have you brought back? Uh, of course, apart from the connections that you made.
I'll go first. So
Sure.
the main takeaway that I had was that Baseline has such a huge following outside of, the viewers on our show. There were people from various industries just there to learn and hear from the speakers on how Baseline could be applied to their line of work. So it was kind of the brave people who looked past the scary word of blockchain and started to realize how services like Baseline could really strengthen their line of work. Like I met a very sweet lady from the industrial and civil engineering sector, which had me thinking of all the use cases we could use blockchain and Baseline for in that area. But in general, it was just awesome to see the types of people who were following and interested in the technology.
Hmm. Very nice. Mark, what do you have to say?
I don't
I
know,
I
pretty
attended the event online and I was super blown.
Oh no, I mean it was one thing to actually have everyone physically in the same room again. That really creates its own magic, and
Hmm.
all of us really. I mean, I had a tremendous time at the entire hackathon and stuff, and it's one of those where you're having a good time when you basically kind of just come start to look at your watch and it's already dinner time, and you haven't really thought, and you just completely lost track of time. But we had like, within the hackathon that we had going in there, we had such a very a slew of extremely capable developers that had
Hmm.
come up with some really excellent component ideas for advancing the technology and stuff. And we were really surprised at a lot of them. Where a lot of them came from. I mean, one of them, the team that actually won it was from General Motors, and we're like,
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
what's good? What are some car guys doing at a hackathon?
Yeah.
And I was glad to see some representatives within the healthcare space to see that too, because um, healthcare, of course, is very slow to adopt new technology just because they're constrained by just this gargantuan data sharing process environment, regularly. But they also have strict data privacy frameworks that they
Hmm.
cannot deviate from. And Baseline has a way that they can go ahead and push through while still maintaining their complete compliance end to end for it. You're just basically bringing down the barriers between the sharing of data between people that cannot really share their
Yeah.
data in the traditional sense. We just need to be able to prove consistency and synchronization. Um, no, it was, and to have so many other people that really get it and are just and have become very passionate about it
Yeah.
was really encouraging because I mean you could just see it in their eyes and just hear it in the way that they were explaining concepts and stuff. They were
Yeah.
really excited about it, and
Yeah.
that's how you know you have something special. So um, it's really one of those Rome wasn't built in a day, but I see that we have gotten a lot further within just within the past 12 months. I mean, it's
Hmm.
giant leaps
Yeah.
uh, ahead of where we were then.
Yeah.
It's great to see it something move away from the ideas and you're sitting around the cocktail table just discussing everything and it's great but you're still batting air around and to actually see something concrete being created right in front of your eyes is just it's
Absolutely, absolutely. That's the kick-ass feeling I get too, and yeah, of course, it's been a quite an eventful 3 or 4 weeks. There was NASCOM event, Big Bang in India, and then we had our we had the ETH Atlanta, of course. I think lead up to that ETH Atlanta event. I think now that we've had that event and so many people who believe in baseline came together and they did stuff that they did, I think it's sort of a platform that we've created, and now we go upwards from here. So that way I see it as a major achievement. And of course, the next one, which I want Sonal to talk more about, is the TSC elections. Sonal, why don't you jump in? Because Mark and I, we have to be independent of all this. We are
Yeah.
we are in the elections. Yeah, we're one of the candidates.
Awesome. So the technical steering committee elections are starting next Wednesday on October 14th, 13th, October 13th. And the technical steering committee is a team of 11 folks who guide the direction of really the baseline community and support our core devs, work with our project governing board. So it's a very important role to take on. And we have our elections coming up on Wednesday. So we have 21 candidates running. So everybody's vote
Okay.
is pretty important because folks like Samrat and Mark are running. There's just a ton of people within the blockchain space, all coming from different backgrounds. So with those votes coming up, to become an eligible voter, you need to submit a pull request to the baseline repo, and it has to be submitted and accepted, which we have some of our current approvers waiting all weekend to approve those pull requests and get voters eligible. So if you, from any time from now until the voting starts on Wednesday, if you submit a pull request, we'll make sure to get them through. It can be anything from a spelling error to some formatting, and just any change you make to the repo will qualify you. So we highly encourage everybody to get a vote. It's going to be very impactful for the direction of baseline in the next year. And on that note, also, I'm going to hop into one more topic, Samrat. So the core dev kickoff meeting is happening on Monday, the 11th. So the baseline core devs, we're rebranding and relaunching. We're using the momentum from NASCOM and ETH Atlanta and all of the developers and folks interested in joining the community. We're going to relaunch. So everybody understands the expectations and what it takes to be a core dev. And our core devs are like the backbone of baseline, we say, because they help build, review, drive the code, standards, everything behind baseline. So on Monday, we have a core dev kickoff. If anybody is interested, go to Baseline's website and you can sign up. So those kind of go hand in hand because the core devs and TSC are very important people in the direction of baseline. So let me know on Slack if you have any questions on how to join or how to get a vote.
Awesome. So all full stack developers, as I said in the beginning of the show as well, all developers, all the kick-ass developers, even I know, and today we are streaming on LinkedIn and YouTube. Uh, Sign up at the website. I've just displayed the website here. Um, and there's a lot coming. There's just lots and lots of stuff coming. Be one of the guardians of baseline protocol. That's what I can say. Thanks, Sonal, for that update, and of course, I'm looking forward to the elections and contributing more in the coming year as well. There is tons of stuff to be done. The standard is already under ratification. It was actually submitted to Oasis with a unanimous vote. That was a phenomenal event for me. I had goosebumps while that was happening. I think it was a couple of weeks back, right? So we had. I think we've come a long way towards establishing the baseline standard, I think. And I think we are now set with the right platform and the right firepower behind us to 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 go full speed with baseline adoption. With that, I bring back Sanjeev. Sanjeev, any parting thoughts for the show? We are top of the hour, so we will close now.
Sure. I think baseline protocol is something which the industry and supply chain in particular would be looking at in terms of establishing the authenticity of the transactions, the proofs of the transactions, which at times brings in litigation and distrust among the
Yeah.
business partners. So that is something which is a new technology which is evolving and coming up would definitely help in a long way in terms of establishing a trustworthy operations.
Excellent, excellent. So on that note, guys, thank you so much for making it to the Baseline Show India today. We do this every Saturday at 6 p.m. Indian Standard Time and 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Thanks so much, all the panelists for joining in today. See you next Saturday. This is
Thank
Samrat
you.
signing off.